Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope y'all having a great day. And with no further ado, let me get into my ACC 2026 season predictions as I've already done the Big Ten, SEC, and Big 12. If you haven't seen those videos, go check them out because I have some interesting takes for how I think these power conference teams will finish the 2026 season. But with no further ado, let us get into it. Starting off with week 0, where the ACC, I think, has the most out of the power conference with 4 matchups, including a conference matchup in NC State, Virginia. But starting off, I think Hawaii wins back to back against Stanford, which might seem crazy, but Hawaii, I feel like, can be a contender for not just the Mountain West this year, but the potential playoff spot the mid majors get. I feel like Stanford, it's going to be a rough year with new head coach Tabitha Pritchard, and I feel like the team is going through a rebuilding phase where they're definitely going to have to get Stanford back on the top, and this could just be another bad season for the Cardinals. Moving on, I think Florida State should take care of business. I'm not high on Mike Norvell, and I think he potentially could get fired, but they should handle business against New Mexico State. And then NC State, Virginia, a huge clash, an old ACC rivalry between these two schools who have been playing since the ACC was founded back in 1940, maybe something. I'm not entirely sure, but back when the ACC was founded, NC State and Virginia were two of the founding members. I got the Cavaliers at home. This game was supposed to be played in, I think it was Mexico, I want to say, but it was moved back due to weather. So it will be a at home in at Virginia Stadium, and I think the Cavaliers get a huge win to start off their season. Moving on to week 1, which has some pretty good games. We obviously have already picked the non-conference games that are against power conference teams. Um, I actually have the ACC winning most of these, going 3-2, with their 2 losses being Cincinnati and LSU. But Wake Forest should beat Akron. Um, I think Miami will beat Stanford, even though Stanford, like, this is one of those 3 games that I did mention last, or I have mentioned throughout these videos, of a top 10 team against an unranked team. Could it happen for the 6th consecutive year? This would probably be one of those matchups if Stanford could pull off the upset, but I think the Canes maybe are finally able to take that step, go from they're really talented, but they just lose these weird games, to finally breaking through and winning the ACC. Duke, I think, gets revenge against Tulane. Although, we'll see. Both teams lost a lot of pieces, especially Tulane with John Summerall going to Florida, but will be an interesting matchup. But I think the Blue Devils get the revenge on Tulane, who beat them last year in New Orleans, and get the win. Pitt, I think, will beat Miami of Ohio, though. That will be, I think, a good game, a match school that definitely could compete for that playoff spot against a Pitt team that very much believes this could be a huge year. Syracuse and Virginia Tech, I think, get easy wins against FCS opponents. And then Monday, Labor Day, SMU going to Florida State. I remember a couple years ago, Florida State played BC at home after they played the Ireland game against Georgia Tech in what was a completely lost season. Could the Seminoles finally, after improving last year but still being very disappointing, could this be a year where the Seminoles finally get things going up against an SMU team a lot of people think can be contenders in the ACC? I do think the Mustangs do win this game and move to 1-0, but who knows? Moving on to week 2. Obviously, we got some um, non-conference big power conference games we've seen. But Miami should beat Florida A&M. Louisville should beat Villanova. UNC should win the first game of the year after I think they lose to TCU in the Ireland game. NC State should beat Virginia. SMU and Virginia should get those wins. But first conference or second conference matchup, Cal, Syracuse, two teams definitely I feel like could have a breakout season. A lot of people are high on Cal, including myself, because I feel like the Golden Bears with Tosh Luploy, with JKS, could be a sneaky team that could have this breakout season the way we've seen other schools have in recent years. But Syracuse could also have a breakout year. I mean, just a couple years ago, they won 10 games, and it felt like the Orange were kind of, you know, back as a football school. But then last year, Steve Angeli gets injured, and the team loses eight straight in disappointing fashion. So both schools, I feel like, could have great years, but also could be disappointing. I think the Orange get a huge conference win to start 2-0. Virginia Tech, Old Dominion, James Franklin, um, notorious for winning these um easy group of five FCS games, and I think against an Old Dominion squad that the team that Virginia Tech lost to a couple years ago under Brett Pry, I think they get a huge win here. And then Clemson, I think, rebounds after a tough loss to LSU to beat Georgia Southern. Moving on to week 3. Still some big non-conference games that we have. Cal, I think, should beat Wagner. BC and Georgia Tech, I think, should beat Maine and Mercer. But some huge conference matchups. I don't know, was Syracuse, Pitt? Remember a couple years ago, during Syracuse's great season, Pitt was one of those teams they lost to in that brutal blowout game. I forget the final score, but like Kyle McCord, I think threw like 5 interceptions in that game, and it was pretty crazy. So both teams, um, should be ready, and I think Pitt gets the win to move to 3-0. Miami, Wake Forest. This could be a trap game, especially early in the season for Miami, which they play two conference matchups and Um, they played two conference matchups in two of their first three games, and they're both on the road at Stanford and at Wake Forest. So I do think this definitely could be a trap game, but I think the Canes will hopefully get a win. Clemson, UNC, um another ACC old ACC rivalry. Both teams coming off disappointing seasons, and both teams hoping to have a rebound year. I'm gonna trust Dabo Sweeney. I'm not very high on Bill Belichick, and I remember when these two teams played last year, um, and UNC was at home. Clemson, it felt like they were falling apart, and then they just dominated UNC from start to finish. So I think the Tigers get back on track. Moving on to Stanford at Duke. I think this is an interesting matchup. Like the Blue Devils technically coming off an ACC, well, not technically, they are coming off an ACC championship game, though that's very much due to the weird tiebreakers there were last year. Stanford potentially could have had an upset win over Miami in week 1, depending on if the top 10 team losing to an unranked team on the road continues this year. But I think the Blue Devils stay or get their first ACC win. And then finally, SMU Louisville, two teams definitely I feel like can contend. Like I feel like Miami most people see as like the top dog, and then there's other schools, SMU, Louisville. If Clemson can get back there, Virginia Tech, Pitt. I feel like there's a lot of schools on that tier 2 of the ACC where it's like they could have a really good season and kind of explode. And I'm gonna say because both teams are um, unbeaten at the time. I'm gonna say SMU on the road wins this game. I just feel like last year they kind of started off slowly, which is what led to them kind of needing to finish this regular season well. So I feel like SMU definitely can get off to a really good start. But this could be a Louisville win, and the Cardinals, who, depending on if they do beat Ole Miss in Week 1, could be a ranked matchup, and Louisville could start to gain some ground in a year where maybe they possibly could um get a their first ACC championship. Um, but moving on to Week 4, right? Yeah, Week 4. We still got some non-conference games. Like I think SMU will beat Missouri State. NC State should beat App State. Florida State should win. Pitt, Miami, Duke, and Virginia should get those wins. I'm not really expecting really any of those teams. Maybe outside of like NC State, just because it is a North Carolina battle, and maybe App State, could pull off the upset. But for the most part, those games should be won by those teams. But we're on the conference matchups with Clemson at Cal. The Tigers have to go all the way across the country to take on a Cal team that very much I feel like will have a good season, and I think the Golden Bears pull off a win. They knock Clemson down, and depending on like if Clemson pulls off the upset against LSU, this could be a ranked Clemson team, and Cal could get a huge win. Something they nearly did a couple years ago against Miami. Virginia Tech, BC, old Big East rivalry, but I'm gonna go with the Hokies. I'm just not high on Boston College this year, and I think the team very much is gonna have a rough season just like they did last year. Georgia Tech, Stanford could be another trap game. That's Stanford because they're known for pulling off these upsets against top programs like they did a couple of years ago against Louisville. I forget if they did one last year, but well, they did a couple, but they are known for pulling off these, upsets where it's like, really? But I think the Yellow Jackets stay unbeaten and get the win. And then Wake Forest, Louisville, say the Cardinals get back on track with a win. Going on to Week 5. Got some interesting non-conference games that we'll get to, but first, Pitt, Virginia Tech, two teams feel like in a similar tier of the ACC where they both are coming with a lot of hype, whether it's due to coaching, players, and very much could be a sneaky team this year in the ACC that we've seen. Like Virginia was last year, like SMU was in 2024. A team that like nobody really sees as like doing very well, but they could explode and have a really good season. And if my picks are correct, they both would be 4-0 entering this matchup. So this would be a huge game. And I'm going to say Virginia Tech gets the win to move to 5-0. BC, SMU, sorry, Eagles, but I think the Mustangs stay unbeaten. Miami, Clemson, a huge matchup. This is one of Miami's, I feel like, bigger matchups because, they've kind of slipped up against these teams in recent years that most people wouldn't believe they would lose to, but it's usually a road game, and it's usually against a team that, very much can compete with Miami, but most people don't believe it. And Clemson, which at this point would be 2-2 up against an undefeated Miami team. This is kind of looking like a couple years ago when Miami took on Virginia Tech. And like Virginia Tech wasn't that great, but they nearly won that game. I think Clemson could pose a threat, but I'm going to say the Canes stay unbeaten. Going on to Cal, UNLV, a huge West Coast battle. The Golden Bears, if if UNLV wins this game, this could be huge for the Mountain West. and UNLV's chances to continue to move up in college football. But Cal, I feel like this is a really good season. But I'm gonna say the Rebels pull it off, or UNLV, is it running Rebels? Anyway, Syracuse, UConn, the Orange. Remember last year, UConn nearly won that game, and Syracuse battled back and put off a huge cover from behind win. UConn, new coach. They are at home, and this would be their second home power conference game because they play Maryland in week 2. But I think the Orange sweep the series against the Huskies. Louisville, NC State, two teams very much in the thick of things. I'm gonna say the Wolfpack get a huge conference win. Virginia, FSU. Remember this game last year? FSU was riding high after that win against Alabama. Virginia at home beats them and kind of led to the Cavaliers emerging as the ACC threats. Could we see Florida State, which they're at 2-2 if these picks are right, going up against an undefeated Virginia team? Could this be an upset win? I definitely think so, but we're just not trusting Florida State right now. Stanford, Wake Forest, two teams currently at the bottom. I think Wake, which Stanford's still winless on the season because I had them losing to Hawaii early in the year, and then Notre Dame goes to UNC to take on the Tar Heels, and I'm sorry, North Carolina, but that'll be another loss on the Bucks. But on to week 6 with some big time matchups. Florida State, Louisville, rematch of an ACC championship a couple of years ago. Florida State shell of themselves. Louisville trying to get back to having that success, and I think they get a win here. UNC, Pitt 4-1, UNC 1-3. I think the Panthers get that win. Virginia Tech, Cal, an unbeaten Virginia Tech team against the Cal team, coming off a loss against UNLV, and I'm gonna say the Golden Bears upset Virginia Tech. They possibly could be ranked at this point, so that would be a huge win. Notre Dame keeps Stanford winless. Wake Forest, NC State, kind of going all home teams so far, so kind of want to go road team, but I'm gonna say Wake. A North Carolina rivalry there gets the win. Georgia Tech, I think, beats Duke. And then Syracuse, Virginia. I'm going to say the Orange pull off the win. I feel like they very much have the talent and have really good coaching that I feel like they could get a huge win like that on the road against a Virginia team that a lot of people probably are now higher on due to that huge win. Virginia, SMU. I'm going to say the Cavaliers pull off this upset. After they lose at home, they go to SMU and pull off the upset. Wake, Cal, I'm going to say the Golden Bears get the win. Clemson should beat Charleston Southern. And Stanford should get their first win against Elon. Perfect there. Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, the battle of the Techs. I'm going to say Virginia Tech gets the win, which leaves Miami as the only unbeaten team as they take on Florida State, a rivalry game in the state of Florida. I'm sorry, Knowles. It's going to be a tough year. Louisville, Syracuse. I think the Cardinals bounce back with a win there. Duke, UNC. I say the Blue Devils get that win. And then Pitt, BC. A Big East rivalry there. But I think the Pitt Panthers move to 6-1. BC is 1-5 right now. Moving on to week 8 now. Duke, Virginia, rematch of the ACC title game. Sorry, Duke. I think the Cavaliers get this win. NC State, Stanford. Yeah, I'm going to say Stanford gets their first conference win, knocking off NC State. Cal, SMU. I'm going to say the Mustangs get back on track. Georgia Tech, I think, beats BC. Syracuse, North Carolina could be an interesting matchup. Syracuse 4-2. UNC's 1-5, so this would be like a huge upset win, but I think Syracuse gets the win. Virginia Tech, Clemson, kind of a rough year for the Tigers, while James Franklin and his Virginia Tech Hokies more than likely ranked at this point. I say Clemson still, they prove that like they're not gone from still being very good, and they got a huge win. And then Miami Pitt, which was another game in Miami's recent history that like they were dominant and then they lose. I think the Canes get the win, staying unbeaten in what's looking like a very competitive ACC this upcoming season. Moving on to SMU Syracuse. The Orange 5-2, SMU 6-1. I say SMU gets the win. Cal, NC State. I'm gonna say the Wolfpack at home get the win. Miami, North Carolina could be a trap game for the Canes, but I think they stay unbeaten. Georgia Tech, Pitt, two teams very much in the thick of things. I'm gonna say Pitt pulls off the upset, going to 7-2. BC, Duke, got the Blue Devils, Clemson, Florida State. Kind of a battle of coaches. A lot of people think could be fired. Two teams seemingly on the downturn. I'm gonna say the Noles get their first ACC win there. Virginia, Wake. You ever say Wake pulls off the upset, knocking the Cavaliers down, and then Stanford, Louisville. Say the Cardinals get that win. Went on Virginia Tech, SMU, a huge matchup. Especially Virginia Tech is good this year. This definitely could be a huge matchup. But I'm gonna ride SM. I think they ride right through. Louisville, Georgia Tech, both teams now at 2 losses. I'm gonna say GT gets the win at home. Clemson, Syracuse. I'm gonna say Clemson gets their revenge against Syracuse. Remember last year, the Orange came into Clemson's building and got a huge dominant victory. I think the Tigers, after a disappointing loss to FSU, they come back, get a win there. Duke, NC State, I'm going to say the Wolfpack win that one. I'm going to say BC beats Florida State. I'm not very high on either team, but I feel like BC definitely can get at least one conference win this year. North Carolina, UConn, I'm going to say the Tar Heels get their second win of the year. Wake Forest over Marymount. And then Notre Dame, Miami, a huge matchup. Remember last year, really decided who made the playoffs. Notre Dame wants that revenge, and I think they get it, dropping Miami to 8-1, but still unbeaten in conference play, which is why they'd be ahead of SMU. Moving on, Florida State Pitt. This might be a downtick for Florida State. I think Pitt gets the win. GT, Clemson. I see the Yellow Jackets make 2 in a row against the Tigers. Louisville, I think, beats UNC. SMU, I'm going to say, beats Wake Forest. Virginia, Cal. I think last year Cal nearly beat the Cavaliers. And I'm going to say they do it. I'm going to say they go on the road to Virginia and get the win. Stanford, Virginia Tech. I'm going to say the Hokies get back on track. Notre Dame beats BC. Syracuse, NC State. I'm going to say the Orange get that one. Duke, Miami, Darian Mensah against his old squad. I'm going to say the Canes stay unbeaten at 9-1. Moving on to week 12 as we're almost done with the season. Virginia Tech, Miami, huge matchup. If both teams ranked at this point, if both teams have playoff aspirations, I'm going to say the Canes win this one. Syracuse, BC. I'm going to say Syracuse gets the revenge for last year when BC beat them. Pitt, Louisville. I'm going to say the Cardinals get that win. Clemson, Duke. I'm going to say Clemson gets the win here. North Carolina, Virginia. I'll say the Cavaliers move to 3. SMU, Notre Dame. Fighting Irish, I think, at home against the Mustangs. Although those are those like two of their three biggest games come against the ACC and probably the two best teams in the conference. So it'll be interesting. NC State, Florida State. I think the Noles get the win here. Cal, Stanford. I say Cal wins this one, and then Wake Forest, Georgia Tech. At GT winning that one. North Carolina is the only school that hasn't won conference game. Right, I already have some of those rivalry matchups finished. Miami, I think, beats BC. Sorry, Eagles, but hey, 2-10 with a conference win. It's what you can kind of expect for this team. SMU, Stanford. I feel like a game Stanford could pull off the upset for, but I'm going to say the Mustangs clinch their spot in the ACC title. I'm going to say Cal beats Pitt to finish 8-4 in what should be a really good year for the Cal team. NC State, North Carolina. Yeah, I'm going to say the Tar Heels win it. I'm going to say they don't allow NC State to get a bowl game. Duke, I think, beats Wake Forest to clinch a bowl game for them. Virginia Tech, Virginia. I'm going to say Virginia gets the win as Virginia Tech finishes 7-5. Really good season. And then Notre Dame, Syracuse. I feel like the Orange could pull off the upset, but I'm going to say Notre Dame. And this is my final ACC standings preseason. Miami and SMU would clash in the ACC championship game. But I think the Canes would ultimately finally win an ACC title. They have Georgia Tech, Cal, Virginia, Louisville, Pitt, Syracuse, Clemson, Virginia Tech, Duke, and Wake Forest all making bowl games. And you just have not the greatest teams here at the bottom. But hey, everybody at least gets a conference win, which I feel like is always the goal for like some of the bad teams. They just want to win at least one conference game. And yeah, these are my ACC predictions. I think Miami finally goes the distance, gets the win. And I think SMU and Miami would be the two um, teams in this conference to make the playoff, unless like another team were to win 10 games. Because in my opinion, I feel like you got to win at least 10 games. Like go 10-2 to make the playoffs. I feel like if you go 9-3, unless like there's like there's like a lot of 9-3 teams competing, then I'd be like, yeah. But like if there's better teams record wise ahead of them, I would pick those teams over a 9-3 team, regardless of conference. But that'll do it for today's video. Hope you guys like it. Subscribe. I hope you guys like the video. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and let me know down in the comments what you think of my predictions so far and your own predictions. Check me out on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Spotify. And I'll catch you guys in tomorrow's video where we start with the mid-major conferences as we start with the new Pac-12. The schedule isn't finished because of that flex week, but we will be predicting at least their 11 games. So I hope you guys stay tuned for that. And until then, hope you have a great day and bye.